I didn't plan to follow him. He was just the janitor. Quiet guy, never said much. But something about him felt off. Not bad, just different. That night, I sat in my car across the street after work, and what I saw hit me like a truck. He was carrying a little girl, his daughter, I think, from a beat-up wheelchair into this old, falling-apart trailer. Her legs didn't move, and she clung to him like she'd fall apart if he let go. Then before going inside, he walked over to an old woman sleeping on a bench and gave her the jacket off his back. Just like that. No cameras, no applause, nothing. That's when I realized I thought I was running a company, but that man, he was holding up an entire world, and no one even noticed. Cynthia Harrow, CEO of Blue Ridge Technologies, wasn't the type to spy on her staff, but something about Marcus Lee, the new janitor, had intrigued her from the start. He was always early, always polite, always kept his head down. But it wasn't just that. There was a quiet intensity about him, like someone who had seen storms most couldn't survive. No complaints, no idle talk, no signs of ambition, and yet he cleaned the hallways with the same diligence a man might give to writing code or conducting surgery. Then last Friday, she saw him picking up a half-eaten sandwich from the trash, wrapping it up like it mattered. That night, curiosity burned in her chest like fire. She had her driver follow him once, just once. But what she discovered compelled her to come back alone. That's how she ended up here, sitting in her car, engine off, eyes wide. Marcus didn't drive a car. He walked. From their downtown headquarters, he pushed his daughter, maybe 7 or 8 years old, in a wheelchair for nearly 5 miles. He carried a backpack, groceries, and a foldable cot. Cynthia followed from a distance. Now she sat outside his neighborhood, if you could call it that, watching him disappear into a sagging mobile home with broken steps and a ripped screen door. She was about to leave when she saw movement again. Marcus came back out with a flashlight and a blanket. He crossed the street and approached an elderly woman on a bench. Without hesitation, he gave her his only blanket. Cynthia covered her mouth in awe. Back at the office, she had tech engineers demanding espresso machines and beanbag lounges. And here was Marcus, giving everything he had for people with nothing. The next morning, Marcus showed up on time, as always. "Morning, sir," he said to the security guard, gently tapping his worn-out badge. His shoes had holes in them. He smelled faintly of hand soap and cheap detergent, but he smiled like he had slept in a palace. Cynthia couldn't stop watching him. She called in her assistant. "Get me Marcus Lee's file," she said. 5 minutes later, a thin envelope was on her desk. No college listed, no references, just a handwritten note in the margins. "Good man, hard-working, quiet." She called HR. "Why'd we hire him?" "Walk-in applicant," they said. "Took night shift when no one else wanted it." That was it. That night she followed him again. This time she got out of the car. As Marcus lifted his daughter from the wheelchair, Cynthia took a step forward. He froze. "Ma'am?" he asked, startled. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, holding up her hands. I saw you last night. I didn't mean to intrude." He said nothing. Cynthia's voice softened. "She's beautiful. Your daughter." He nodded, eyes guarded. "What's her name?" "Hope," he replied, almost a whisper. It broke her heart a little. She looked at the girl, her body fragile, but her eyes sparkling like morning dew. "I wanted to say thank you," Cynthia added, "for what you did for that woman last night." Marcus looked down, uncomfortable. "She's just cold, that's all." "No," Cynthia said firmly. "That's everything." Later that night, Cynthia sat alone in her penthouse and staring out over the city. Something gnawed at her, something she hadn't felt in years. Not guilt, purpose. The next morning, she typed something into her calendar. Project HOPE, 7 a.m., meeting with Marcus Lee. Cynthia didn't wait for her assistant to draft the meeting request. At 6:58 a.m., Marcus walked into the break room to refill his mop bucket and found her sitting at a folding table with 2 paper cups of coffee and a file labeled Hope. He froze. "Sit," she said gently. He obeyed cautiously, sitting like a man about to be fired. She slid the coffee across the table. "You take cream?" He blinked. "Ma'am, is everything all right?" Cynthia leaned in. You work harder than any VP I've got, she said plainly, but there's no record of your past before 6 months ago. No tax history, no resume, no emergency contacts. I've got billion-dollar acquisitions with more transparency than you. Marcus lowered his gaze. I didn't lie on my application. No, she said, but you hid. Silence. She waited. No pressure, no threat, just stillness. Finally, he spoke. I was an engineer once, he said, voice low. Senior lead at Halverton Robotics. Her eyebrows lifted. That's a top-tier firm, she said. Was, he corrected, until they laid off a third of us overnight. I came home early that day to surprise my wife and found her packing to leave. Said she never signed up for being poor. Cynthia's breath caught. She left you? Took everything, even my car. Left Hope behind like she was luggage. He wiped a hand over his face. Hope was born with cerebral palsy. They said she'd never walk. I cashed out my 401k, sold everything. Worked 3 jobs just to afford her treatments. And now you're a janitor, Cynthia murmured. He nodded. Because this job gives me nights with her. I can't afford nurses. She needs me. Cynthia leaned back, visibly shaken. You ever think about going back to engineering? I don't have the degrees anymore, or the suits, or the luxury of chasing dreams. She studied him. You still build anything? Marcus paused, then reached into his worn satchel and pulled out something wrapped in a rag. It was a tiny robotic glove, made of recycled wires, gears, and what looked like old soda cans. She can move 2 fingers with this, he said softly. Built it from scraps. I'm working on a walker next. Cynthia stared at it, speechless. This man wasn't a janitor. He was a genius hiding in plain sight. That night, Cynthia returned to her office and stayed late, digging through every proposal she'd rejected in the past 6 months. Ideas for community outreach, tech for humanity programs, and mobility grants that had been laughed out of boardrooms by men in silk ties. She circled one in red ink, Project Phoenix, a mothballed idea to fund innovations from underprivileged inventors. She called her assistant. Reopen this file, she said, and find me a lab with a 3D printer. I'm making Marcus a CTO. 2 weeks later, Marcus walked into the company cafeteria and froze. A standing ovation broke out. Cameras flashed, and there at the front stood Cynthia, with Hope beside her, wearing a brand new walker, standing with help for the first time. Marcus collapsed to his knees in disbelief. She stood up this morning, Cynthia announced, voice cracking, and she said the first word I've ever heard her speak. She turned to the little girl. Tell them, sweetie. Hope looked up, gripping her dad's hand tight. Daddy, Marcus sobbed. The room erupted in cheers. In a private corner afterward, Marcus whispered, Why are you doing this? Cynthia answered quietly. Because once, a janitor raised me, my father, and no one ever gave him a chance. But the story wasn't over. Later that week, a man in a gray suit showed up at Marcus's trailer. You're Marcus Lee, right? Marcus stepped forward warily. Who's asking? The man held up a badge. FBI. Marcus's heart stopped. Marcus stood frozen on the porch of his trailer. The man from the FBI flipped open a leather badge wallet. Special Agent Lowell, I'm here about Halverton Robotics. And your daughter. Hope inside was humming softly, her robotic walker clinking with every gentle movement. Marcus stepped outside and closed the door behind him. Whatever it is, I'm not going back. Agent Lowell shook his head. We're not here to arrest you. Then he added, we're here to thank you. An hour later, in the back booth of a diner, the agent dropped a manila folder on the table. Inside were photos, financial reports, offshore wire transfers, blueprints. What is this? Marcus asked. Evidence, the agent replied. You were the only engineer at Halverton who flagged those schematics before the crash. The robotic arm model? It had a design flaw. Your email warned them, weeks in advance. Marcus's jaw tightened. They ignored it. They didn't just ignore it, Lowell said grimly. They deleted it, scrubbed the internal servers. When the unit malfunctioned and killed a child in Chicago, they buried everything. Marcus looked sick. I didn't know it went public. Lowell nodded. And you weren't the only whistleblower, but you were the smartest. Your prototype log saved lives, Mr. Lee. The DOJ is filing charges this week. Marcus stared at him, stunned. But I'm nobody. The agent leaned in. Not anymore. That same week, Cynthia called an emergency board meeting. She walked into the glass conference room, heels clicking, holding a folder of her own. A few board members chuckled when they saw Marcus sitting beside her, in his janitor's uniform. "What's this?" one VP asked. "Take your janitor to work day?" Cynthia didn't smile. She dropped the file on the table. "This is Marcus Lee, former Halverton engineer, innovator, caregiver, genius." Another executive smirked. "He pushes mops." "Wrong," Cynthia snapped. "He builds walkers, from trash, in a trailer, for his daughter." Then she threw the next file down. "And this is Project Phoenix. His first invention for us just passed beta testing, and it's projected to save us $12 million in healthcare partnerships." The room went silent. Cynthia looked around. "You wanted a clean brand image? A DEI pitch that's not fake? A founder's story? This man is all of it." Then she smiled coldly. "And if you don't see that, I'll make him the CEO of my next company, and you'll all be begging him for jobs." Silence. Then someone clapped. Another followed. And then, applause. 1 month later, Blue Ridge Technologies launched the HOPE Initiative, a nonprofit wing dedicated to assistive tech for low-income families, spearheaded by CTO Marcus Lee. They released a video of Hope walking to her dad with open arms, smiling, giggling, shouting, "Daddy," as he scooped her up, tears streaming down his face. The video went viral, 6 million views in a week, and somewhere in a different part of the country, a young mother watched it on her phone. The same woman who had walked out years ago. She reached for her car keys, but Marcus's story wasn't hers anymore. One night, Cynthia and Marcus stood on the balcony of the New Hope Research Center, watching the sun go down. He looked over at her. "Why did you really follow me that night?" Cynthia sipped her wine, then smiled softly. "Because you were too quiet, and the people who are too quiet are usually carrying the heaviest stories." Marcus nodded slowly. Then he said something he hadn't said to anyone in years. "Thank you." She looked at him, truly looked at him. Thank you, for proving that heroes don't always wear suits. Sometimes they just carry mops and broken dreams. Marcus Lee's real-life invention inspired a line of low-cost mobility tools for children across America. The HOPE Initiative now supports over 30,000 families and growing. Never underestimate the person cleaning your floors. You might just be walking past a miracle.